I'm very much looking forward to Marvel Rivals, so I decided to do the abilities for Hawkeye and Doctor Octopus if I were to add them to a game. First up, in the damage role with 250 HP, we have Hawkeye. He would be a long-range attacker, and his play style, kind of obviously, would be very similar to Hanzo's in Overwatch, especially with his primary fire just being a bow, basically the same as Hanzo's. Holding right click would lock you in place and put you to a first-person perspective for better aim, and then his E ability would change the arrow currently in your bow to an explosive arrow that would embed itself into an opponent's wall, and then when you collect E again, the arrow would explode, doing damage to nearby enemies as well as destroying terrain. If it was in your bow and you wanted to switch back to normal, you'd just click E again, and the 7-second timer wouldn't start until after you exploded the arrow, or 7-second cooldown. His shift would be very similar to his explosive arrow, but when you shoot it, it just pulls you to wherever it hits, and it would have a 10-second cooldown instead of 7, and it would be useful for getting out of fights or getting to good vantage points. His ultimate ability is rather basic, setting your cooldowns to 0 when you activate it, and then giving you a slight damage and speed boost for its 10-second duration, as well as revealing all enemies not in full health to you and your allies, similar to a mix of Widowmaker's and Ultimate and Sombra's ability in Overwatch, if I had to compare. Finally is a team-up ability. So from what I've seen, it's tanks and supports that actually activate team-up abilities. But for this one, it would require Ant-Man, who is not yet in the game, but would, in my opinion, I think he'll be a support if or when he's added. So, but the Hawkeye would click C to show he was ready, and that'd lock him in his sniper stance, but he wouldn't be able to shoot anything unless he clicks C to disengage. And then, when an allied Ant-Man was in range, he would click C and he'd jump onto Hawkeye's arrow. So then Hawkeye would be able to shoot the arrow, and when it hit or landed somewhere, Ant-Man would jump off, grow into Giant Man and do a stomp before shrinking back to normal. And next up, we would have Doc Ock, who would be a tank with 900 health, and in terms of his base appearance and also his abilities and movement, he'd be very similar to Alfred Molina's Doc Ock in the movies. His left click primary fire would just be a simple tentacle strike where one of your tentacles, they'd take turns, would just strike forwards. It'd be hit scan, though it would appear to have an animation. And then his right click would just be a short dash forwards on his actual legs and would have a 5-second cooldown. And this would just be used to help him get back into a fight. And since he's a tank, he'd want to be in front of his allies and defending his team, so this would help him do that. His E ability would be called Fling, and basically one of his tentacles would grab a random nearby piece of rubble or even an enemy, and then just hurl them forwards. If you grabbed rubble, it would just do damage to anyone it hit. If you grabbed an enemy, it would do damage to them being thrown and anyone being hit. And then his shift ability would basically be all his tentacles would stop what they were doing and flow in the air around him, which would block all attacks apart from maybe ultimates, and would also do like lots of little hits to enemies who are in its range, but be mostly a defensive ability. He would have a passive ability called something like Titanium Tentacles, but basically it would just be saying how when he walks, he normally does it just on two of his tentacles, and then if he got close to a wall, the tentacles would automatically kind of latch on, and he'd be able to climb it, and while he was climbing, he would still be able to do his basic attack and use his fling ability, but he wouldn't be able to do his dash or his ultimate or his tentacle flurry. Finally is his ultimate, the power of the sun in the palm of my hands, which would summon his fusion reactor from Spider-Man 2 would rise up from the ground in front of him and start sending high damage beams of energy in all directions around it, and the enemy team would basically have to run for cover or risk being incinerated. And this would be very good to just to do on a control point in order to make sure your team could secure it. Thank you for listening. Please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons. And if you're interested, comment anyone else you'd like me to make abilities for in the comments below. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.